2 plus 2 equals 4. Wonderful world you live in, full of such certainties. No such in my political world. In my world, 2 plus 2 equals 5. If you're trying to make a new suggestion for what to do to a politician, 2 plus 2 equals 0. If you're running a government IT project. Or 2 plus 2 equals whatever fits the story if you're doing a bit of journalism. So the role of government has reached an interesting point. For about 30 years, the role of government has been to tell you what to do, and it has got pretty oppressive at it. They're trying to change that now into how do we help you do what you want to do within certain limits and objectives. There will, particularly in school maths, there will always be a heavy set of limits and objectives. It's absolutely seen as a core of education, so we're always going to be careful about how we change what goes on in that core, in GCSE in particular. We've seen previous experiments like the ILIA maths subject cause immense damage, and we are not going to let that happen again. We also have a belief that academic education is a right, that something like algebra, the understanding of how you can manipulate numbers with symbols, is fundamental, and every child has a right to access it. One of the great falsehoods that I grew up with in politics was that what can you expect with kids like these? What we've all managed to show over the last few years is it isn't the kids, it's the way they're educated. School turning Hackney Downs into Mossbourne Academy and many other examples show that you can do it, and that to say that kids have a right to an academic education is not something that is empty, but something we ought to fulfill. And listening to what has been said yesterday particularly, but also today, I would challenge you. I'd say, you think you can do it better? Prove it to us. You're mathematicians, you ought to be able to prove something. All I've heard today is illustrations of what can be done differently. I've not seen any figures to show that it improves the outcome. You really ought to be able to produce them. If not singly, you ought to be able to get together to do it. On the aspect of do what you want to do, that is an enormous change. I don't suppose any of you are really used to that. Somebody said, we've got behind the screen, and it's only a little thing. That's all you're going to get. There won't be any big government initiatives. There's no money to splurge anyway, and it's against the philosophy of this government to tell you what to do, to impose some wonderful project. Like, I mean, how much did we lose on diplomas? Hundreds of millions spent on diplomas, and now they're dead. We're not going to do that. We're going to look to you to come up with ideas, to prove they're right, and then we'll back them. We'll see which of them are best, and we'll help them spread. Behind the screen has an advantage at the moment because of Eric Schmidt. He put David Willits on the spot, so David Willits, which he wasn't entitled to do, promised that it would turn into a GCSE and an A-level, and now the government have brought down the shutters and said, after that, no new qualifications until 2016. So it is an opportunity. It's a little one, but it's an opportunity that you can use. There are others. Kevin James pointed out that we could bring computer-based mathematics into liberal arts degrees. We've hardly got any here, but they're just beginning in London, and I hope will spread. The advantage there is there's no entrenched way of doing it. There's a great opportunity there if one of you pick that up. But behind the screen is something which I really urge you to try and get involved in. Yes, it's a programming qualification, but the programming only need be a quarter of what's going on. There's plenty of room for maths in there. It's real world. Everything is involved with industry, with working on real world problems. There are no rules. It's just a question of what turns out to be good. I had a happy interview with Nick Gibb at the beginning of the project, where we agreed that he would impose no restrictions at all on the way we assessed it, on what was taught, as long as at the end of the day we had a qualification that everybody, him, industry, particularly industry, thought was excellent. There's no curriculum. How can there be a curriculum when you're working with industry and their own particular problems, when you're working with technology, which is changing every 6 months? There's plenty of room for it to invade whatever you want. There's no waiting. The first projects are going in November. We're going to learn by doing. We're not going to sit there and write papers. We're going to get in there and find out what works and make it happen. Assessment will be the servant and not the master. and it will end up as something which is tremendously exciting and involving. My title comes from a family of Essex gangsters, but one of them discovered his inner mathematician and founded the Lucasian professorship. I'm looking for some of you to discover your inner gangster and not just sit there waiting for you to be offered something, but to get out there and get what you want for yourselves.